And for that, I felt it would greatly help if I could get Mashi to employ his formidable intellect on my behalf and keep it employed there, at least up through the point where I would otherwise have ducked off the platform after my presentation in utter humiliation. "Would you give me a few days?" I asked him. "I mean, you've caught me a little off guard here. I hope you're not planning to leave right away, are you?" "My dear Magister Guggenmuss, if you should need as long as a few days to think up a single reason to remain in a place that your instincts tell you to flee like Odysseus from the Lestragons, by all means be my guest. But I can't help but observe that it doesn't bode well for your side of the argument, does it? Nevertheless, I will answer your question directly. I purpose to linger here for a while. I must investigate the B-School situation and perhaps perform an application. I've already lined up some interviews with industrialists who are patrons of the Management Studies program. I fancy myself a budding CEO. In the meantime, if you hit upon some justification for frittering away your life on philology, do let me know." "Have you told anyone else yet, like Professor Wymie?" I asked, indicating the chairperson of the Department of P&PP, underneath whose rough exterior beat a heart of rusted iron. "No, I plan to delay my eagerly anticipated interview with the good woman until my inquiries have determined for me a definite course of action. Care for another round?" he asked, lifting the pitcher. I wanted to ask what had provoked him to take this direction, but I had learned long before with Mashi that questions about his mental states were strictly off limits. In any case, I didn't feel much like another round, or even finishing the beer I already had, and used my Horatian obligations as an excuse to cut our session short. By the time I reached my dormitory room, I could see that the mood indicator was showing dangerously low levels of the generally unwarranted optimism that had kept me puttering along at Latmu, despite lacking the kind of philological talent that would win a student even a Bulgepont Junior. I kept looking at my phone, which was sitting quietly on my desk, and I considered how pleasant it would have been if it had rung and at the other end of the line had been the chirpy voice of Sunny Lee, merely calling to ask how I was getting on. That's the sort of boost a fellow in dire philological straits needs every once in a while, and I tell you that the world is the worse off because he doesn't often get it. I'd actually had one notable success with Sunny. We'd gone out dancing the previous spring after my improbable victory in my orals, but she'd pranced off during the summer to Gstaad or Monaco or somewhere, leaving me alone with Horace. When school had resumed, she seemed to have taken up with one of those very tall, very handsome, and very rich wastrels from the law school, who had no doubt been president of his prep school class, and whom you'd really have liked to see come down with a permanently disfiguring case of facial acne. I had hinted to her several times that I wouldn't mind a reprise of our dancing date, but it hadn't so far elicited a positive response. I'd read in one of those collections of old papyri that philology students are regularly required by the professors to go digging around in, that the ancient Greeks in Alexandria had had a supposedly foolproof method for winning the love of a beautiful woman. You were to seek out the woman each day during a 7-day period, but before speaking to her, you were to chant the word neferieri 7 times subvocally to yourself as you gazed lovingly at her face. The instructions did not say how to avoid appearing moronic while doing this, but I had taken it up anyway and was now in my 4th day of applying the spell to Sunny Lee. It had led to some awkward moments, such as that very morning when I looked up from my carol in the library to see her standing beside me. She greeted me in a friendly way and asked if I happened to have a certain commentary on Pindar on my desk that was missing from its assigned position on the shelf. I didn't, and would have so informed her, but of course I had to quickly get through my 7 recitations of Neferieri first. I was flustered, and it kept coming out Nefertiti in my mind, which meant I had to go through it all over again, all the while staring at her with a loving grin. This prompted her to inquire about my health, and as I was still caught up in my mantra, I could only keep staring affectionately at her. Unfortunately, she'd already retreated into the stacks before I got to the 7th utterance of my special word. The Greeks had had other interesting spells I'd found, for all kinds of things. For example, to treat a case of swollen testicles, you were instructed to take a cord from a coin bag and say with each knot you found in it the words castor once and thab twice. Or, if you wanted to cause men who had been drinking to appear to have donkey snouts, you could take a wick from an oil lamp and dip it in donkey's blood and then unobtrusively dab the drinkers' noses with it. And if you wanted to reinvigorate a woman who no longer enjoyed having sex with you, you were told to apply the foam from a stallion's mouth to your instrument before inserting it the next time in the lucky woman's receptacle. Needless to say, I had not progressed so far in my relationship with Sonny Lee that this third spell could even be contemplated, much less tested, but I can report that the castor and thab thing does work if you give it sufficient time. Anyway, after gazing at my phone and chanting Neferi at it for an extended period without causing it to come to life, I decided to wander down to the pool hall in the University Commons. Pool was the one sport I had stuck with after college, after I noticed that in the others I was prone to ending up on the bottom of a pile with several people each the approximate size of a cube truck on top of me. The fellows I usually played pool with were, with one exception, amiable, honest, knowledgeable, of reasonable size, and likely not to pummel you. In short, just the sort you wouldn't have minded palling around with when your morale was not at its highest. It was my luck that when I arrived at the pool hall, I could see from the portico the one exception standing alone before the table in the oversized person of Alvy Barg. Alvy, a former fullback on his college football team, was a graduate student of truly remarkable tonnage. You had to suspect that somewhere far back in his family tree was a brontosaurus, if I've got the name right. The one with a body that turned out to be too large for the disproportionately small brain it carried around in its cranium, so it required a second one somewhere near its posterior. Unfortunately, Alvy didn't have a second brain, nor did he loll lethargically about in the marshes supping on water lilies, though heaven knows it might have been preferable if he had, as it probably would have made it easier to avoid him. By contrast, he was all fidget and bounce and had an unsatisfactory habit of showing up, especially when you wished he wouldn't. He didn't so much study philosophy as pounce on it and put it in a chokehold until it cried uncle. If it had been Alvy who had said he was leaving our class instead of Mashie, I would have congratulated him and wished him a most heartfelt and enthusiastic Godspeed.